Are you curious about how Capstone Leadership Solutions can help your small healthcare organization to improve and grow with more speed and ease? If so, reach out to us at capstoneleadership.net. There's a contact us page, or you can email us at info@capstoneleadership.net. We're here to help. So, in those low psychological safety environments or relationships, I actually have 5 categories of questions that you could consider including in rounding. Now, when we suggest rounding questions, we suggest that during a rounding session each month with your employees that you might ask 3, 4, maybe 5 questions. You want this to be like a 15, 20-minute encounter, and you want it to be rich conversation on each question. So by asking too many questions, you're not going to go deep on any one question. So these would be questions you'd want to go deep on.
Welcome to Culture Change RX, the podcast for healthcare professionals that are committed to creating a thriving workplace culture, improving the experiences of employees and patients, and ultimately unlocking their organization's next level of potential. I'm Sue Tetzlaff, your host and co-founder of Capstone Leadership Solutions. Join me and my insightful guests each week as we share actionable insights for navigating the crucial people side of the business of healthcare. Subscribe now for a weekly dose of Culture Change RX. Now let's dive into this week's conversation where culture change takes center stage.
Hi there, glad you're here. This is Sue Tetzlaff, co-founder of Capstone Leadership Solutions and host of the Culture Change RX podcast. I'm recording this about 1 week out from our company's 13th annual Healthcare Executive Forum. We held it this year in Madison, Wisconsin. And the topic this year, because we change it every year, was on the topic of high reliability, just culture, and psychological safety made simple. It was a great gathering of healthcare executives, and what a great conversation and topic and tactics to equip and inspire healthcare with is high reliability, just culture, and psychological safety. So one of the sessions that I presented on day 1 was taking our 9 core leadership practices that at Capstone, we recommend these 9 core practices to our healthcare partners as what we would call a leadership bundle or leadership standard work. So when an organization is on a journey to improve their results, elevate their culture, strengthen the future of their organization, and grow, one of the 4 core execution systems that we help them to adopt and optimize is the leadership system. And that leadership system has 3 core components. 1, it has a model of leadership. We call that the leadership bundle. Our recommended leadership bundle contains 9 core leadership practices. And then the other 2 parts of that system is an ongoing training and mentoring system to help leaders become competent and consistent to get the best results from these 9 core leadership practices. And then also an onboarding system for new leaders to begin the process of elevating their competency and consistency in this way of leading. So it really creates for the organization, this is how we lead around here, and this is how we onboard and continually develop our leaders in this model. It was really a fun challenge for me to take each of those 9 core elements of the leadership bundle and to link it to high reliability, just culture, and or psychological safety, and consider how to use that actual practice for the purposes of becoming more high reliable as an organization, elevating psychological safety, and fostering a just culture. And today for this episode, I wanted to share with you one of those 9 core practices and its link to elevating psychological safety so that you too can take away some learning from this work that we did to prepare and deliver the content for this event. And so the 1 core leadership practice I want to focus on today is strengthening relationships through rounding. So rounding, many of you may know, is dedicated time that a leader takes, usually one-on-one, to ask purposeful questions to prompt a meaningful discussion. So instead of just reacting when there are issues or problems, that we round proactively to prompt discussions on important topics such as safety, equipment, supplies, and space, training and education, recent or proposed changes, recognition, and even our leadership. So we can have these rich conversations with our staff. And by doing so, we're developing a stronger relationship. An employee's relationship with their manager has been shown to be a major factor in how they feel about their job and their employer, and certainly can impact how well they perform at work. Prior to this event, I was attending some additional training and education just to brush up and refresh and re-inspire on the topics of high reliability, just culture, and psychological safety. And in one of those national trainings that I attended, one of the key phrases that just stuck in my brain from a pediatrician, a leader in quality and safety in a children's hospital, he used these words: leadership is local, culture is local. And wow, that really hit me as it relates to how important strengthening relationships through rounding is, how important that tactic is when we think about leadership is local, that relationship of an employee to their direct supervisor, and how much that impacts not just that person, but the culture of the department. So leaders rounding consistently with their employees strengthens relationships by, one, getting to know each other better, fosters feelings of being valued and understood, and both parties become more comfortable talking about important topics. So right out of the gate, I found it quite exciting to be able to take this leadership practice in particular, strengthening relationships through rounding, and shine a light on high reliability, just culture, and psychological safety through the use of this practice. So really it's about asking the right questions, right? So what leaders ask about elevates its importance and keeps it top of mind. And then in follow up to rounding, when we follow up and follow through from rounding, that helps us as leaders to build trust. And so what we harvest or learn during rounding, if there's things that we need to follow up on, when we do that, that strengthens the relationship and builds trust in that relationship. So what I was able to provide for our attendees at this event was a toolkit that included 3 options for leveraging rounding for HRO, just culture, and psychological safety. And really, it was about 3 different ways that we can include specific rounding questions in our practice of employee rounding. So one option is to have some conversational rounding prompts that connect to your organization's specific employee survey questions that are related to high reliability, quality and safety, resilience, trust, teamwork. Sometimes there's a safety index, a leadership index. So if we can take an actual survey question that employees might be familiar with because they took the survey, we can learn more about how our employees are feeling about that very specific thing. So beyond the annual survey, we can have this personal conversation with them. So, for instance, on an employee survey, I pulled this from one of our partner organizations. On the employee survey, there was a question that employees rated that stated, there is a climate of trust within my department. Another one, I feel free to raise workplace safety concerns. Another one, I can report patient safety mistakes without fear of punishment. So you can imagine how taking those 3 survey questions, one or more of them, you could actually, as a leader during your employee rounding, turn those into a rounding question. Now, if you don't have an already existing strong relationship with that employee, there's low trust or safety perceived in the culture of your department or your organization, your employees engaging and responding to these questions might be a little harder, which is why one of the options I'm going to provide you beyond this first one is for those low trust or low relationship situations. But if your organization, your department with this individual, there is already a growing or strengthening sense of trust and relationship, you could probably use those questions right from your survey and turn them into rounding conversational questions. A second option is actually something that I found from Amy Edmondson. She is a great resource on the topic of psychological safety. Amy Edmondson. So you might want to look her up if you're not familiar with her work. It's quite spectacular. And what I did was I adapted from her suggested psychological safety assessment. I adapted some conversational rounding prompts from there. And actually, I'll put all three of these options into a link in the show notes. So you can look for them there. But an example of some of the questions that would be based on her recommended safety assessment is, when mistakes happen around here, how are they usually handled? And a follow-up question would be, does that approach help people learn or discourage them from speaking up? Another question we could ask during rounding that's based on her psychological safety assessment is, what's the environment like when someone takes a risk or tries something new? And a follow-up question to that during rounding could be, do people feel supported or second-guessed when that happens? So actually, in this section of questions that we could possibly ask during rounding, I have 7 different options adapted from Amy Edmondson's psychological safety assessment. So I just provided you a couple examples, but there's a total of 7 that I have to share with you. And then the third option is that option for a low trust work culture or relationship where you're just really working to get it going, establishing it, building it from the start. And it might be really helpful if you're a new leader. It might be helpful if you're a leader with a new employee. It might be helpful if even you've been a leader of a department for a long time, but trust and psychological safety have been something that's been on your radar to make better for the future. And now you're ready to start that. So, in those low psychological safety environments or relationships, I actually have 5 categories of questions that you could consider including in rounding. Now, when we suggest rounding questions, we suggest that during a rounding session each month with your employees that you might ask 3, 4, maybe 5 questions. You want this to be like a 15, 20-minute encounter, and you want it to be rich conversation on each question. So by asking too many questions, you're not going to go deep on any one question. So these would be questions you'd want to go deep on. So you'd probably only want to ask a couple, and then you might have some other questions related to other topics that are important for you to check in on during rounding, also during this rounding session. So the whole rounding session doesn't need to be focused solely on high reliability, just culture, or psychological safety. But in this third option here, I'm providing 5 different categories, and under each of those, 3 or 4 different questions. So you're going to want to look them over in the document I'm providing in the show notes. So these 5 categories of questions that might be helpful for rounding when there's low psychological safety in the environment or in the relationship are observation-based questions. These focus on what employees notice, not what they did or think. So that might be safer. Or a category of experience-focused questions that invite sharing without requiring emotional risk in the answer. Another set of these questions that I'm suggesting are related to appreciation and recognition, and these build connection and open the door to safer conversations. The fourth set of questions are around the idea of suggestion-oriented questions. And these focus on solutions rather than problems and reduce the risk of it turning into a blaming or fear-based conversation. And then lastly, asking future-focused and other low-risk questions, which encourages engagement without critique. So there you go. 3 options for incorporating questions during employee rounding that are focused on the topics of high reliability, just culture, and or psychological safety. And again, what leaders ask about elevates its importance and keeps it top of mind. And always with rounding, some recommendations is to be consistent, rounding, and then follow up and follow through. Being consistent on that does help to build trust Be very purposeful in your questions. So being razor focused on things that are most important and purposeful, such as these topics that I've mentioned here today. And then, of course, I've mentioned this several times already, follow up and follow through. As one of our coaches, Karen, says, follow up and follow through is the secret sauce of leadership. So if you uncover something that your employee needs or wants from you, when we follow up and follow through, we're really strengthening that relationship and trust in that relationship. So there you go. And look for that link in the show notes, because those very specific resources for these 3 options will help you to be able to effectively incorporate great questions into your practice of employee rounding. And if you want to let me know how that's going for you, or if you have any questions about that, at Capstone Leadership Solutions, for a long time now, we have had a private Facebook group, and it is called Fans of the Framework, FANS, Fans of the Framework. And if you're a Facebook user, you can go to Facebook and in groups, search for Fans of the Framework. You can request to join, and you can join I don't know how many. I know there's well over 1,000 leaders that are in that group. And it's a way to either message us and or post to share what's working for you and or to ask questions where other people can benefit from the response of our answers. Or if you want to reach out to us privately, you can go to our website, capstoneleadership.net. There's a contact us page, and there's a place where you could submit a question or a query there as well. And we will get back with you and respond. So thanks for tuning in to today's episode. And I really encourage you in follow-up to today's episode to incorporate into your practice of employee rounding some questions and engage in some rich conversations around high reliability, just culture, and psychological safety using one or more of the 3 options that I shared with you today. And look for more details in the document I'm providing in the show notes. See you next week, next Wednesday, when we're back with you with another episode. Bye now.
Thanks for tuning in to Culture Change RX. If you found value in today's episode and you are a believer in fostering change in healthcare, join us in making a difference. Follow, rate, and review our podcast on your favorite platform. Share it with colleagues and your network. Together, we can make a lasting impact. Until next week, keep inspiring positive change.